Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host Jacob Shorba, and today I'm going to talk about some potential trade partners for the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 2023 NFL Draft. Now, if you followed our channel before, watched our mock drafts, you'll probably have seen some of these teams before, but I want to talk about 7 today I think would make sense for this team. I think there could be some other ones that, sneak in potentially. You never really know exactly what's going to happen on draft day. But these ones make sense for a few different reasons, so we're going to talk about them. I've got 2 teams that I'm going to mention as potential trade-up options. Now, I don't think that the Jaguars are going to do that, just to be completely honest. I think they're in a good spot at 24 where someone that they value really highly is going to be there. They made it clear the other day they've got about 3 to 4 players, maybe even 5, that they would heavily consider at 24 and prefer to select. So the chances of one of them being there, I think, is pretty much like, a 95 to 100%. So there's going to be someone at that point to where they don't really have to move up. But say that a player who's really talented, like Devon Witherspoon, or even somehow a Paris Johnson falls a little bit down the board. I don't think that happens, but it's possible, right? If that's happening on draft day, then we have to consider these trade packages. And I'm sure the Jaguars right now are thinking about this as well. What if, say, Brian Branch is going to go off the board before your pick and you want to go secure him? Are you willing to move up in the draft? So that's why we want to talk about this stuff and the trade-ups as well. But more likely, if the Jaguars are moving, I think they're trading back, accumulating more capital, and still making a solid selection, either later in the first round or early day 2. And then they can package picks later in the draft if they want to move up and secure guys who they feel like should have gone a lot earlier. So let's go ahead and get started. The first team I want to talk about, and you'll see on here we've got all the value for each pick. This isn't exactly what the NFL goes off of. Teams have different values they assign. It also depends on the draft. But it gives you generally an idea. We'll try to keep it kind of close to this. But the first team I want to talk about, and probably the farthest I could see them moving up, is a team like the Green Bay Packers here at 15. So, like I said, highly doubt that they would move this far up, but this is probably the highest spot they would go if they wanted to go secure a guy they feel like is a blue chip prospect that should have gone, say, in the top 10 of this class and didn't fall. I'm not talking about necessarily a Jalen Carter. I think he's off the list for them because they've talked about having, 3/4 of the prospects in this class not even on their list because there's going to be 500 some players, coming into the NFL after this. It's pretty crazy. But Jalen Carter, there's no way that he is on that list of 127. I would have to think that. So you're talking about maybe one of the tackles at this point that they feel like should be going a lot earlier, or say a corner like Devon Witherspoon, or maybe even a Joey Porter that they want to hop the Washington Commanders for. And for the Green Bay Packers, why I think they could make this kind of move, I don't think they're necessarily in a full-blown rebuild, but they are a team that could use capital right now, needs to reset the cap a little bit, needs to get younger. And so making a move like this, acquiring capital, if you trust your team to draft for that, which maybe fans don't there, but of course the building is going to trust themselves to do that, they would be fine taking extra picks. So probably the most aggressive move that the Jaguars could make, but it does make sense if you want to go land one of the best players in this draft. Because if you think, say he's like the 8th guy on your board, right? You're essentially giving up draft capital to move up to the number 8 overall pick in your mind. So how much are you willing to give up? Now, in this scenario, I've got the Jaguars probably giving up a 24, obviously, but they probably have to give up their second rounder if they want to move this far up the board. It's very unlikely you're giving up anything less unless you're going to package a bunch of later picks and really throw away your opportunities later in the draft. Now, the second option I've got here is with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this will be the last of our trade-ups that we'll talk about. So for Tampa Bay, they are picking at 19 in this draft, and they are one of these teams that we just quite frankly don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they are in a world of hurt right now. They lost Tom Brady, obviously, this offseason. They were a mess last year, even with him. Managed to take the best quarterback of all time right now and do nothing with him, not even have a winning record. Things are on fire in Tampa Bay right now. And so this is a team that should probably be trying to get more picks, trying to get younger like the Packers, but more desperate to do that and kind of rebuild this roster. That's the situation they're in right now. So get more picks, make more selections, and rebuild. And so I think this makes sense for Jacksonville because you look at the teams that draft after. You have at 20, Seattle Seahawks. You're talking about a team that could go take Osiris Torrance. The Jaguars may see them as a team that could go after, and I wouldn't want this guy necessarily at 24, but if they like Brian Bresee, Seattle's one of those teams that could go pick him up. So that's another reason that they may feel. But the Chargers as well, at 21, you're talking about Dalton Kincaid maybe going off the board there. If you like a receiver a lot that's falling down the board, then the Chargers are also a team that could be prone to go take that. Now, the next two, Baltimore and Minnesota, may not be teams that would go for Bryant Branch because you've got really good safeties there, or guys you've drafted recently. I mean, you just look at both the teams' last draft. They got Kyle Hamilton and Lewis Steen, respectively for each team. So I don't think they're going safety again in the first round. However, if you like a corner there, if you like Deonte Banks and he's on the board, I don't think he's getting past there. If you like an edge rusher, both of these teams are in that mix right now. Because the Vikings, we don't know about Zadarius Smith. Don't know if he's going to stay there. And for the Ravens, they end up losing Calais Campbell. So there's some stuff that's happened for both of those teams and why they could be willing to make that kind of move. Plus, you don't know if someone's going to trade up. Because if you got really good players falling down the board, sometimes you got to make a move for them because someone else is going to. And this is where we saw a ton of moves get made last year. So just some thoughts on that. Now, I think for Tampa Bay's pick, you're not giving up as much, but you're still going to give up a day 2 pick. It's not going to be your second rounder at 56, but it's rather going to be your third rounder at 88. So you're going to lose that selection most likely, or you're looking at giving up, say, 2 fourth rounders. But, they've dealt with Tampa Bay before. We saw what they gave up last year. I believe it was a 4th and a 6th. And we're talking about the first pick of the 4th round. So that's a more valuable pick than our 4th rounders this year. And it's a pick that's almost as valuable as 88. You're moving up in an earlier point in the draft, maybe one less spot because it's a jump of 5 rather than 6. But because it's earlier in the draft, these picks are going to be more valuable to teams. So you've still got to give up probably a 3rd round pick to get this done. So Tampa Bay, probably the last spot that makes sense. I'm not sure you're doing business with any of the other teams. Maybe Los Angeles with the Chargers, but I'm not sure about that exactly. So now we're going to talk about the teams that, to me, make a bit more sense. Because I think it's more likely for Jacksonville to trade back, and it's the better decision. So the first option is the Dallas Cowboys. And you could leave this very simply to the fact that the New York Giants select right before them. These guys are division rivals. Everyone who watches the NFL knows that. And Dallas may want to poach a prospect from the New York Giants. We've seen teams do this before. They want to steal someone from a division rival, and they go make the move. This is a situation that's about perfect for Dallas and perfect for Jacksonville. And if you feel really confident that they're not going to take any player that you really want at these picks, could be an easy way to go get, say, a day 3 selection. I think with the Cowboys, you could probably get 129 from them. That is their 4th round selection here. But the question is, are you willing to even risk that for a 4th round pick? Because what if another team trades up with the Giants? Because the Giants could be upset. They could say, well, shoot, we just lost this guy we wanted. Well, let's trade back. And then you got a team like, say you like Dalton Kincaid at this point, and that's how the board looks. That's your top guy is Jacksonville. They trade back with the Bengals, and they go pick up Dalton Kincaid. You don't like that kind of move. So got to be careful with that. But that is probably the That's the least positioning they'd give up as far as a trade, but you just got to mitigate your risk in that and make sure you're not making a stupid decision, because it could end up being really dumb, when you consider how small the reward is with a 4th round pick. Talking about 2 spots in the 1st round, so not a big jump. Now, the next one, I think this is one of the first of, 2 in this, potentially desperate teams in the draft. The Cincinnati Bengals at number 28. I think they are a team that could be very desperate to move up, and it could be for a plethora of players. The most likely ones I could consider here, and I don't think Bijan Robinson will be available at this point, but if he's on the board, this is one of those teams that could move up for him. That would make plenty of sense for them. I think they could also look at a player like, Michael Mayer, perhaps at 24, that they could really like. We obviously mentioned Kincaid too, could be higher on him, but Mayer, the rumor is that he's not going to fall past 26, that the Cowboys will not pass on him if he's at that selection. They kind of view him right now as a very similar player to Jason Witten. It's a fan favorite there, team favorite there. Makes sense for Dallas to go select him. So maybe the Cincinnati Bengals want to jump for that reason. But perhaps more likely is that they're trying to fix their tackle problem. Because, they secured Orlando Brown, who, a lot of people look at him differently. They either see him as a great player or see him as a very overrated player. Well, Jonah Williams wants a trade now. So who knows what's going to happen there if he even plays this season. He could sit out even if they don't trade him. So you've got one guy at tackle that you trust. You already have a weak offensive line. So as the Bengals, I feel like you would very much consider moving up here to go jump the Bills, go even jump, teams like the Dallas Cowboys that you think could possibly go offensive line and get a guy. And what about Kansas City too? We've seen Kansas City move up. They're going to be the next team, the second to next team we talk about on here. But Kansas City could move up and jump them all for a tackle, because all these teams need offensive line help. So I think for Cincinnati, they could be very desperate at this point and could give you a nice selection. So I could see them giving up their 3rd rounder to make this kind of move. I don't know about the 2nd. I think that seems a bit rich, but hey, we've seen crazier things. So that could be on the table, but you're probably getting 92 from them, getting a nice selection. You can get a good player. What you are probably saying goodbye to, though, relative to what your board looks like, if Osiris Torrance is there, I don't think he stays there until 28, because you've got the Buffalo Bills on the board, and I think that is a home run pick for them at 27. So that would be my thoughts on that. But the Bengals, definitely a team that could be considered. And then for our last 3 here, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles, be a 6-spot move. So you're moving back from 24 to 30. And for Philadelphia, they're a team that's in win now mode right now. They want to go win a Super Bowl this next year. They want to go all the way back. And for them, there are a lot of players like for the Bengals that could be available at this selection that they could really like. We'll throw out Bijan Robinson again. But what about Nolan Smith? That's a player they were linked to, possibly even at 10. It's pretty early, but they could use a guy like that. He's very similar to Hassan Reddick as far as just how he's built, the way his career's kind of gone at this point. And the Eagles obviously have liked having Reddick on their team. So maybe they go get another guy there. They've lost people on their defense. Go add to it. Another player that maybe hasn't been linked to them a ton, but would make plenty of sense is Isaac Small. That's the guy they lost, Osiris Torrance. They could really want to move up for him because they lost Sumalo this offseason and could stand to upgrade that position over what they have. So the Eagles, there are a lot of players that they could want to move up for at this point. Problem with them, though, they're missing a lot of day 3 picks, so you're likely taking a 2024 selection in this. They do have a 3rd rounder, so you'll probably take that. But if they're going to outbid other teams, then you're probably talking about taking a 4th rounder next year as well, just to sweeten the deal a little more. And that would be a late 4th rounder given. You're talking about this kind of range where it's like around 130. So who are you going to land there? I mean, it's stuff you got to consider as Jacksonville. And you're giving up an opportunity for quite a few players. So that's where the value's got to increase a lot at this point. Now, our final one for round one, and we'll talk about one round two option. The only one I think makes a ton of sense would be the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't see this as too likely, just because these teams are going to be major competitors for the years to come. At least that's what we hope and what we think. But while they're major competitors, the Jaguars could get a really nice deal from them, value the picks, and want to move back here. Because they have had drafts where they've done really well around this point, in the late day 2, early day 3. They picked up a lot of good guys in 2021 you look at. And even this last year, they got Luke Fortner in the 3rd round. So maybe they value those picks a lot, see a lot of talent at that point, and decide to make a trade. So you could see something like Kansas City giving up, 31 obviously, but 95, their 3rd rounder, and then giving up 122, which they acquired from, I can't remember who that would be. I guess either Seattle or Miami. Probably Miami from the Tyreek Hill trade. So that's a potential trade. Chiefs can move up for a tackle. They can move up for a receiver. But the question is, do you want to help out your enemy? And I don't think you do. And you could throw that out about the Bengals as well. But I am a lot more scared of the Kansas City Chiefs at this point as far as how talented these teams are. The Bengals are obviously a team to fear too, but the Chiefs are the ones who ended up winning a Super Bowl and have a much stronger group overall. So that's how I feel about that. I wouldn't do it, but it is an option for the Jaguars, especially if they want to finish off day 1 as the final team. Now, the one team that I will throw out on day 2, and this will be our last one we talk about, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is the one that if we are going to trade back, I would probably bang the table for the most. And maybe the only reason why I wouldn't, other than obviously giving up about 8 selections, you could see some players you really like go off the board. You do give up that 5th-year option. That is probably the one part that's not that great. But if you trade back with the Steelers, they could be very desperate to give up a lot for pick 24. And here's why. So for the Pittsburgh Steelers, there are really about 3 different options that we've talked about in the draft for them that make a ton of sense. One of those options gotten a little weaker. That is Jordan Addison, because they did acquire Allen Robinson via trade. However, I think it's like 1 year that they've got him for, and it is a $5 million deal. He's had injury concerns. There are a lot of reasons for that deal to not really impact the long-term future. So you do got to consider that with the Allen Robinson trade. But they could really want Jordan Addison to their team because he played with Kenny Pickett in college. They had a great connection together. And those are the kind of things you want to do when you have a young franchise quarterback. You want to surround him with people who are familiar if you can, that are talented, or just put a great receiver around him, maybe even if he hasn't played with him before. So Jordan Addison makes a ton of sense for Pittsburgh, but there's 2 other positions that make sense too, tackle and cornerback for this team. Whichever one they go with at 17, one of those is not going to be resolved. So there will be a reason for this team to trade up. As far as the cornerback position, if it is still on the board at 24, it's going to be off the board very shortly after. And tackle, you're going to see a run on them very possibly, maybe even before 24 or throughout the rest of the first round. So for Pittsburgh, I don't think they can wait until 32 and get a great player at one of those picks. You got 32 from Chase Claypool. Like, that's a great trade, right? Take advantage of it. Go use that pick to move up and get a great player. And at the same time for Jacksonville, if you move back to 32, you can either go pick the best player who fell out of the first round that no one understands why he's still on the board, get a guy with a chip on his shoulder, or you control the first pick of day 2 and another team gets desperate to give you even more for it. Now, yeah, if you trade back 2 times, like, you're probably not getting the greatest player in the world with your first pick in the draft. But you can get a heck of a lot more out of that. You could do better with that. Maybe you get future picks. Maybe you get a future first rounder. Who knows? You know, we don't know what teams will offer. It depends on who's doing it, but I'm completely fine with that. You know, I'd rather have more in terms of the draft picks I'm getting and the value of them than just getting them right now. I'm fine moving stuff towards the future. So, I would 100% be fine with Pittsburgh. I think they're one of the best options for this team. But ultimately, talking about all these teams, if you have Brian Branch on the board at 24, I don't think you're moving. You know, talking about trade backs, obviously. If you have Osiris Torrance there, it'd be really hard for me to move that pick still. I think if it's Dalton Kincaid, though, you know, which I really, really like him as a prospect, but you can stomach moving that pick, that's fine, because you could get something that you see as a bigger need and get extra draft capital out of sacrificing the opportunity to pick up a Kincaid. You know, it is possible in that situation. But if you've got a great player there, you got to take him, right? So I don't know if they're going to move around day one. I think it makes more sense if you have a great player available, you go pick him up. Maybe you're moving on day 2, trying to secure guys. That makes a lot more sense for this team. Plus, you got all these 4th rounders, right? You can package those 4th rounders to move up in the 2nd, to make big moves, get really good players, maybe move up in the 3rd, and really hit those first 3 picks if you want to move around. So that's kind of how I see it for this team. But I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you taking your time here. Really excited for the draft here. We got a few more videos we'll put out before. We'll have a live stream as well, I'm hoping. So it's going to be great. Can't wait to see who's wearing the teal and black. So just want to say that. Gonna hop out of here. So I will see you guys in the next video. And go Jags.